Good evening, everyone. I'm your technical critic, and it's time for my review of The Hobbit, Part 2, Desolation of Smaug. And if you're wondering why I'm speaking so quietly, it's because I just came in, and I literally just saw The Hobbit, and oh man, I have so many mixed feelings. So many mixed feelings. How should I put this? There's basically three people who watch this movie. There's... Oh, by the way, speaking of people who watch this movie, I did not watch this on the night it came out because TP can no longer burn the midnight oil ever since she got a real job. And, well, so I had to wait for my friend Amanda to come and see this with me. God bless her, because she sat through that movie 3 whole hours. Half of the time she needed to pee, and she did not get up once. She didn't even complain. And she got up in the middle of the Pacific Rim fight scene where you've got the kaiju ripping apart the giant robots, and she missed that entire thing. So good on her. She loves this. She loves this series of movies, and quite frankly, I wish she was here to counterpoint everything I'm going to say. Because if you like these movies, it actually, you know, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what I say. If you like these movies, if you like the books, if you hate these movies, you're going to hate what I have to say, because the little kid in me who watched the action scenes was like, that's pretty good. But Pacific Rim was better. And the hardcore Tolkien fan in me was like, that was interesting. I didn't like how they changed that up. Why is this here now? Why are they putting that into this subplot? Did we really need it? And the regular moviegoer part of me, who was checking his watch every now and then, was like, well, this is okay, but I still feel like I need 1125 back. So if you're probably going to dislike this video. I'm going to ask you, if you're going to dislike it, click now and tell all your friends to dislike this, because if you're going to dislike this video, we as ringers, there's a lot more of us than there are people who hate Rebecca Black, so we should at least try to make this the most hated video on the internet. I think one of the reasons I was so underwhelmed by this series is because I know that the middle movies of trilogies are usually the weak ones, Two Towers being the absolute exception, because that is a standalone movie. And especially because this is a prequel to a series of movies that came out 10 years ago. And as you all know, prequels never live up to the movies that they're trying to basically elaborate for. And if you don't believe me, there's the Magician's Nephew for C.S. Lewis's for his Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. There's Prometheus. Oh god, what a cluster Prometheus was. And then there's all the Star Wars trilogies. There's Monsters University, which was okay at best. We know Mike is not going to become a scarer, so we know that it ends badly. There's a list of prequels since 1941, both in books and in movies, that literally set the trend. They set the trend. And on top of that, this is a middle movie, so I was like, you know what, this might not be good. So I went online, I looked at all the spoilers. All the critics were raving. All the people who hated the first movie, they're like, the second movie is the shit. It is the best thing since sliced bread. It tops the Lord of the Rings. And I was like, these are the same people who hated the first movie and loved the second one. Which means that since I love the first movie, I'm really going to love the second one. But literally, 20 minutes into it, I could feel my expectations dropping like the stock market. I built myself up too much, and also I think it might have been the fact that I saw this in 2D. I did not go to see the 3D showing because that would mean I'd come in even later. And now is 1 in the morning on a Sunday, and wow, I'm tired as it is. Imagine me trying to do this at 3 a.m. It would just be absolutely impossible. I do need to see this movie again with TP. Maybe Christmas Day, the day she finally has off. I'll go to her house. I'll be like, here's your Christmas present. Can we go see The Hobbit? And she'll be like, did you see that? It's like, yeah, I need to see it again, this time in 3D. Come on, let's go. And we can go and see it. I owe her. I also owe Amanda 11.25 because as much as she loved this movie, I feel like I did something wrong in taking her to see it. I feel like there were it's like I was watching two movies, two really good movies, fighting to get out of this. Because you have the Gandalf subplot and you have the dwarf subplot. And before I begin, I have to say, this movie is not about Bilbo. Bilbo is there, Bilbo kicks ass, but this movie is not about him. It's all about all the other characters. It's about developing the characters that were basically just there for the entire first half of the movie. The first third of the trilogy. Here's the thing with the Gandalf storyline versus the Hobbit storyline, and this is just where I'm coming from. I feel that they had the Gandalf storyline in there because they needed that actual climax. I didn't feel that the fight with the dragon between the dwarves, Bilbo, and the dragon was the actual climax of the movie. No. That was we need to set up for the opening of the third movie. So this is how they got the dragon out of Erebor. Now, the actual climax was Gandalf facing down Sauron, and you see just this contest of power with the two of them. You see Gandalf sounding off with magic, basically announcing his presence with magic, like, yeah, I'm here, come do something. And then you basically see Sauron come out, it's like, yeah, I'm here, I'm gonna do something. And you see the two of these fighting each other, and the way they're battling, it's like, you actually get a feeling these two are trying to kill each other. That there is actual danger and that there is actual consequences to the outcome of this battle. And when Gandalf loses, you're like, oh no. The fact that they just have him imprisoned in a cage at the very end, it's like, okay, well, maybe if we had seen him like imprisoned in a cage down in the depths of the deepest, darkest dungeon, maybe where the wargs are, you've got wargs snapping at him. And like then you've got everything rising up and you see the orc armies marching out. I think that would have made a better scene. But here's what I think is happening. And it all comes down to the actual source material. When it comes to The Hobbit is the first actual book that J.R.R. Tolkien wrote. It begins, in a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit. And remember, this was written on the back of a test sheet of an empty for a question that a student didn't fill in. He began, in a hole in the ground there begins the Hobbit. Whereas the appendices and the Silmarillion and all these other things, these are the culmination. These are the products of many years of work. These are the bridging pieces, the things that fill in the story, the ideas that have been stewed and revised and refined over and over and over again until you get this perfectly synchronized thing. And I think that's why the story arc with Gandalf is a lot more compelling than the story arc with The Hobbit. It has nothing to do with one being a better story than the other. They're both good stories. It's just that this one is at the end of a glorious career. It is the masterwork of the. It's a piece of the masterwork of the end of a glorious career. This is the keystone. This is the thing that helped it all to get off the ground. And I think that's why it's like you've got two movies fighting to get out, and because they're fighting with each other, they're too busy fighting with each other and not fighting for our attention. Neither one of these storylines fully culminates into everything it could have been. If they had just gone ahead and made a movie with starring Gandalf called The Necromancer, I would have watched that and I would have loved it. Because you know what? We could have started from the very beginning and we could have gone through all the canon. First of all, Gandalf gets purposely captured by the Necromancer. He doesn't find out who he is, but he meets Thrain. Thrain's going slowly insane, but he's like, hey, you know what? I have a son. Give him this map and key. And Gandalf's like, okay, I'll do that, snatch. sacrifice you so I can escape. Oh, Thorin, here's this map and key. Don't ask how I got it. Let's go to Rivendell. White Council, Mirkwood Forest, Tombs of Angmar, back to the Necromancer's castle, gets captured again, bring in Galadriel, bring in Saruman, blow up the fortress with magic like they're supposed to be. Gandalf's actually, he's like, thanks, see ya. He takes off. Battle of the Five Armies coming together. You got elves, dwarves, and men about to slaughter each other. Gandalf just steps in the middle and goes, wait! There's an orc army over there. You should probably take care of that. Cut to black. Best Lord of the Rings movie ever. That's what that would have been. And then you've got The Hobbit, and I feel like it was not as good as it should have been. I did like what they did with the lens that they explored this movie through, at least the Bilbo half. They looked at this movie through the lens of greed and how it affects people in all these different ways, because you've got Bilbo and his lust for the ring, where when he loses the ring to that trapdoor spider, and he basically butchers it to get the ring back, and you see it corrupting him, and you see his thirst. The ring in this movie is a lot darker. It's a lot stronger force than in the Lord of the Rings, because in the Lord of the Rings, you see Frodo, and you see the two of them interacting, and you see Frodo like literally falling to pieces. But the ring seems like this inane, inanimate object. In this movie, the way you see it corrupting, and you see its influence, and you see how it lets Bilbo understand the black speech, you see how the dragon can sense the fact that he has the ring because he's so evil. Oh my gosh, the ring has such a larger, malevolent presence in this that you just don't see, and I like that. That gave an inanimate object its own personality without it even having to speak, and it is pretty good. So if I'm going to review this movie, I should probably start from the beginning. So we start with they're running, the dwarves and the whole group, they're running from the orcs who are hunting them. A lot of people are like, hey, you know, these orcs are taking me out of this movie. I didn't think so. I thought that along with the orcs, in The Hobbit, because it's only a 300-page book, you have a lot of characters, both adversaries and allies, who are there, they're present, but they have no motivation, they have no backstory, they have none of these things, or at least not in the book. Some of their stuff is in the appendices, some of their stuff is in the Silmarillion. It's scattered everywhere. But in the series of movies, they're giving everything context, and they're giving everything backstory. For example, you have Azog and his son Bloag, and they're both hunting Thorin throughout this entire thing, and you see the reasoning behind it. You see that yes, these guys are acting evil, and they have a reason, because his quest is to wipe out the line of Durin. Thorin's of the line of Durin. He has to stop it, and then there's this bigger motivation. We gotta secure this mountain so that we can get the dragon, keep the dragon safe, etc., etc., etc. And then you've got characters like Beorn. In the book, Beorn is kind of like this powerful werebear who can transform at will. Here it's more he's not able to transform at will. It's more that he's under this kind of enchantment of his, like this enchantment of his people that they're basically forced to turn into bears. But here's the thing, he's only on screen for 15 minutes, but you get a backstory, and you get a context, and you get why he hates orcs, and you get all this other different stuff. You get the story of his people, and it makes you feel something for him. You're like, oh my gosh, I understand where you're coming from. And even though it's like almost like a cameo, you're like, I like that. That was good. It adds so much depth to the characters, especially as I said earlier. They're looking at it through this lens of greed, and you see how it affects everybody. You see Thorin, his greed, how his these almost this overwhelming desire to take back what is his, and to you really see him as a leader in this story, whereas in the first one he was basically just an asshole who was there to remind Bilbo that he is not good enough. But in this movie, you actually see him step up. You see him debate. You see him debate with the Elven King. You see him face down the dragon. You see him lead the actual company. You see him fight. You see him do all this other stuff. You see him in Lake Town making a speech to people who really should not see his coming as a good thing, but he convinces them because he's a leader, and it gives him a character and a perspective and a depth that you just did not get in the first movie, and I like that. Another thing is that Gandalf does not just disappear out of the blue. He actually has reasons for disappearing out of the blue. For example, in the first movie, Gandalf disappears from the group because he gets angry at the dwarves for not thinking ahead of, why don't we go to Rivendell, there are trolls around here. Whereas in the book, it's just, they just happen to know, hey, by the way, Gandalf went missing. What? I guess we're spending this night without him. And when he reaches Mirkwood, in the book, it's like, okay guys, send the ponies back. Not my horse, I'm riding it. Aren't you afraid of Bjorn? Nope, I'm taking it to the Necromancer's country. Bye. Meanwhile, in this one, it's like, okay, I'm gonna come with you guys. Enter the forest a little bit. Look at the statue. Oh, there's blackspeak on that statue. Hey boys, don't desaddle my horse. I got a split, cause literally something just came up. Moving on to a character like Thranduil, which is, again, here's this two-dimensional character that appears in the book, but you never actually hear anything about him. Here he in the book, he's holding them because he thinks they're spies, and he wants to know their purpose. Here you actually make him into a king who lives in the region, who knows what's going on around him, and it's like, okay, I know who you are, I know what's inside that mountain, and if you want my help, you've got to have a piece of it. You've got to have a piece of it waiting for me. When he talks about the white jewels, you see a hunger like a wolf in his eyes. And I don't know the name of the actor who plays Thranduil, but he played that scene so well. I can't help but feel he was more, it's almost, his performance of Thranduil, and I hate to say this because a lot of ringers are going to get pissed off at this, his performance of Thranduil was more true to the character of an Elven King than the Lord of the Rings, the Hobbit, was to the character of Thranduil in the first book. I found the part with the Master very interesting because, again, you've got this two-dimensional character that we're giving a backstory, but it almost felt, and I felt that this was very overwhelming throughout the entire second movie. They were trying their damnedest to make this look like the Two Towers. I mean, let's recap. You've got the ring story, right? And then you've got all the references to Sauron coming out. We're going to raise an orc army, and we want to take over everything. We want to spread, excuse me. We want to spread darkness everywhere. And then you've got that snide little joke with with Legolas and Gloin, where it's like, who is this? That's my wee lad, Gimli. See, it's Gimli. And then there are so many overt references. It's almost like it's saying, I mean, even in Lake Town, where you have these two completely different characters of the Master and, I guess, his tax collector is who Unibrow is. Like, literally, as soon as I saw Unibrow, I'm like, oh god, it's Wormtail. Because literally, he's hunched over. He's this really slimy character that you know would flip in an instant, and it's like, oh my gosh, he is literally like just saying, hey, look, you remember that? You remember that character who betrayed everyone in the second movie? It's him. It's not him. It's a different guy. It's just, I don't know. Orlando Bloom. Orlando Bloom is Legolas. Was Legolas really necessary for this story? I mean, was that just to say, hey, look, the guy who was Mr. Exposition in all three Lord of the Rings movies, guess what? He was here at the same time, and this is a crossover that could have potentially happened. It almost feels like they were trying to cut and paste certain aspects of the Lord of the Rings back into these Hobbit movies. And that's not a good thing, because as a 9-hour trilogy, this series should be able to stand on its own 2 feet and stand on its own story and say, yes, we are prequels to this other epic thing. But look, we have our own compelling characters. We have our own compelling series. We have our own compelling sets. We have all of these things that separate our story from that story. Yes, we may be related, but we have our own traits that you can like about us too. I feel they did do that, but not as much as they should have. Speaking of things that took me out of the movie, let's talk about the love triangle between unnecessary Legolas, slightly necessary I think her name is I can't pronounce like elvish names that well. Elf lady. We're gonna call her she-elf, like the orcs do. Legolas, she-elf, and Keely. Oh my god. It's could we not have a strong, kick-ass female character without there having to be this cliche, these two characters must fall in love, but because we know that Keely is going to die in the 3rd movie, they will never be together? I mean, really? Was that necessary? Who actually looked at the Lord of the Rings and said, you know what this needs? This needs a love triangle. I don't know whether or not it's because Peter Jackson caught a lot of flack from the internet for the last 3 movies he made, because you've got Frodo and Sam and everybody's screaming, they're gay, they're gay, they're gay, when really you look at the source material and you're like, no, these are 2 people who have gone through a huge amount of stuff together. They basically died for each other. They basically nearly died for each other. And that's going to bring about a closeness between 2 people that you've shared something with each other, and you've seen into the other person's soul. It's not that they love each other. It's that they're comrades. And what you have to understand is that J.R.R. Tolkien was a product of World War One. And in trench warfare, you had these horrible, horrible situations where you literally did not know if you were going to make it from minute to minute. And the people who came out of that developed close comradeships with each other, similar to similar to Frodo and Sam. And I think that's what he was trying to illustrate. But in the modern day context, everybody looks at it and says, oh, they're gay. And I guess that with this particular trilogy of movies, you couldn't have 13 short, hairy men being led by Sir Ian McKellen, who is outwardly gay, and 1 short, effeminate-looking hobbit with curly hair. I guess that would have been way too much. Although, to be fair, a way they could have easily avoided this problem is if they had made some of the dwarves, and when I say some, I only mean 1 or 2, if they had made some of the dwarves female. When I read the Hobbit originally, I always thought that Fili was a girl's name and that Dori was a girl's name, so we had 2 female dwarves going along with this company. Even a name like Oin. Oin could be interpreted as a female's name. And here's the thing, you wouldn't lose out on anything, and you wouldn't, because dwarf women, as we know from the 2nd movie and also from this, I I guess from this picture in the locket, we know that they have beards. So it's not like you would have been losing. You'd have still had 13 dwarves. It's just that 2 of them would have been female, and they could have kicked ass, and we wouldn't have had this problem. It would have been 13 guys, and an effeminate hobbit being led by a tall gay man on an epic quest to slay a dragon. I guess that's the power of the internet troll, to affect change for the worse, even in things that they really shouldn't have any domain in. Speaking of Lake Town, and I'll get into the other sets, I like the design of Lake Town as this place that has become impoverished over time because trade no longer passes through here. But when I read about Lake Town in the book, I almost picture like a medieval Venice, like yeah, it may be a little bit derelict, but it still has a look to it and a feel to it. I guess I'm okay with it. I just thought I just thought it would look a little bit differently. Yeah. Also, Mirkwood Forest. I love the design of Mirkwood Forest. I just wish that we had stayed there a little bit longer. Like, because you remember, as a ringer, I've been chomping at the bit for this all year. I was pissed when this movie was not released in June. So imagine the fact that I had to wait all the way for December for this movie to come out. And here's the thing, with a lot of the pictures that were released, and a lot of the still shots where you get all the dwarves sitting in Mirkwood, and you've got like scenes where that old dwarf with the ear horn is sitting up with Bilbo and he only speaks Dwarvish, and like they're both standing guard, and you're like, well, what would they talk about? I honestly thought that we were going to get more scenes like that, but I guess those bits were cut for time. Otherwise, I thought it would have been very interesting to see how the idea of illusion played on the dwarves while they were in the forest, whereas instead it was like, okay, we're in the forest, it's full of illusion, let's just make them run around in circles. They fell into the exact same trap that Harry Potter 4 fell into with the hedge maze. It's like, okay, instead of making the maze true to form, let's go and make it this thing where illusion overtakes your mind, and they did one thing with it. They had the guys get lost. That was it. That was the entire purpose. And you're like, I was like, that could have been so much better. That could have been executed in such a better way. We could have actually had some kind of compelling story there about, instead of this, Bilbo sees all the dwarves turn into different versions of himself. I feel like that was a wasted moment. There were a couple of wasted moments in this scene, in this movie, especially with all the stuff they tried to shoehorn in, and I was literally counting. I was envisioning the Cinema Sins video that is eventually going to be made out of this movie, and I was just counting. Okay, he's gonna look at this. He's gonna look at this. He's gonna look at this, and oh no. There was a lot of unnecessary stuff in this movie. For example, the capture of the dwarves by the Elven King. Yeah, great. The love triangle that they started between Keeley and She-Elf, no. That is absolutely unnecessary, both from a storytelling perspective and from a movie perspective. I mean, I'm not even bothered. I'm not even that bothered by it. As a Tolkien, I'm more concerned that they're shoehorning in this absolutely unnecessary subplot, and it's going to go nowhere, and it's just going to waste our time. Valuable screen time that could have been dedicated to doing other things better. Also, the battle through the river running as they were escaping the elves, where the elves are basically fighting them, and then the elves start to fight the orcs. It was great. It was a great action scene. You needed an action scene at that particular point to break up the sneaking monotony that had been put on top of us by that stupid love tryst thing, that love triangle that they were coming up with. But again, was it necessary? I don't know. I like the second half of the fight, where one, you have Bombor fighting, because here's this big fat dwarf that you never actually see do anything. But then you get Bombor, you see him fighting, he's like he's totally kicking butt, and then he jumps back in the river into the barrel, I thought that was good. I don't know, Keely being shot with the arrow, again, that is just in service of the love story. It serves no actual purpose except to keep him behind. Again. Oh, and there's another unnecessary thing. Was it actually unnecessary for dwarves to be left behind? I mean, really, if they hadn't done that silly love triangle thing, they had just made She-Elf a great elf who kicks ass and whose basic motivation for going after the orcs is like, you know what? Yeah, this is our fight. We do need to go after them, and they hunt the orcs to Ezragoth. Great. I'd have been perfectly fine with that. But it. Oh, that reminds me. Another big reference to Lord of the Rings. Kingsfoil. Again, that silly. They have to go and find it from the pigs, and to cure Keely from a Morgul arrow. What is the this would not have been necessary if we this would not have been necessary if we had not tried to shoehorn. This is all that stupid love story's fault. This is all that stupid love story's fault. Another thing that I thought was unnecessary, and you can hate me for this however much you want, it was the fact that they couldn't find the keyhole. And it does set up a good thing with Thorin and how much he wanted to do this and the disappointment of not being able to. But still, the fact that he gave up so easily right on the doorstep of his inheritance was quite frankly baffling. And again, it took me out of the movie. It's like, well, maybe he should have waited around, seen if something would happen. I mean, all it really does is establish that Bilbo is smarter than the rest of the dwarves, and we've already done that in the first movie. We've established that, and to be quite frank, it really puts the dwarves in a bad spot, because it's like, okay, so Bilbo figured out and the dwarves didn't. Big whoop. So what? How does that add to the story in any way, shape, or form? It doesn't. It's just there. Moving on to the special effects. It went, I have to say, again, I saw this movie in 2D. I don't know if it was because it was filmed in 3D and then converted into 2D, which I know is a thing, and was filmed in, I think it's FRI. Yes, FRI. No, it's HFI. It was filmed in HFR. I don't know why I can't pronounce that. It was filmed in HFR, and I guess maybe in the conversion they slowed it down. But throughout this entire movie, some of the CGI looked really, really good, and other times it looked like something out of the Matrix era of animation for high-speed movement. Like the last 20 minutes where you've got the dwarves fighting the dragon and a lot of it is CGI'd. I felt like I was watching a video game because literally you see the CGI go from crystal clear to blurry 2002 movements, and it was it really took me out of the movie for for that action scene. I was literally looking at the CGI and going, why why couldn't this have been done better? Did they run out of money and then it was like, screw it, we gotta do this however we can? Or maybe it was a time, don't tell me it was a time limit thing, because I know this for a fact. On the Colbert Report last year, Peter Jackson went on the show, and right at the end, when he was being interviewed by Colbert, he said, you know, I have the second movie on my iPad. If you want, you can come back to my hotel room and watch it. And that made me mad, because I knew from that point on that I was then forced to wait an entire year to see a movie that had already been made and cut together. So I don't know. I don't know if time was actually a factor. I don't think it was, but who knows. Speaking on the end of this movie, Mr. Benedict Cumberbatch. They could not have picked a better person to play the dragon. I actually liked him as Smaug. His voice is just sinister enough that I could picture him playing it. And here's the thing with Smaug. They didn't stick to the character in the book. But they made it better. They actually made Smaug's character better, because a dragon is a creature of greed that calculates what's in its best interest. And when you consider that this dragon has been sitting there for almost I think it's 150 years. Yes. When you consider that this dragon has been sitting there for over 100 years, thinking, well, one day maybe these dwarves are going to come back and try to do something. And when you consider that he has the Arkenstone, he knows what the Arkenstone is, and it even says in the book, dragons are pretty sure of what the market value of their treasure is. So he knows what the value of the Arkenstone is, not just as a precious gem, but to all the kingdoms of the dwarves. So the idea that, okay, at some point someone's going to come here and try to steal this Arkenstone should have occurred to him. And what you basically see is a mind that has dwelled for so long, an evil mind, one that enjoys destruction and death, and watching and doing terrible things to their enemies. You see the mind of a creature that has been working on this problem for 100 years. Like when Bilbo is literally right next to the Arkenstone, Smaug can see him right next to the Arkenstone. He goes, I'm almost tempted to let you take it, to let it destroy him. And I actually felt that that the character of Smaug in this movie was even better than in the book. But that being said, Smaug as a fighter is one of the most inept dragons of all time. I mean, you see Smaug at the beginning of the first movie. He is laying waste to a city. He smashes that city. He breaks into a mountain. He breaks through the wall of a mountain, and he faces down an entire dwarf army to claim all this treasure. And you're telling me that Smaug the Magnificent, Smaug the Terrible, Smaug the greatest calamity and last of the great fire drakes, cannot take care of 13 dwarves running through his domain? It boggled me. It had bothered me right through. Plus the plan that the dwarves had to deal with the dragon once they got caught was absolute Deus Ex Machina convenience. I mean, the fact that you have the statue of Thor there, and you just so happen to have all this gold waiting to fill the statue, and they just so happen to have enough to fill the statue, and then they break it open and you see Smaug's greed. That was a good thing though. I have to say this: the use of Smaug's greed against him, in order to try and defeat him, I thought that was an interesting line to take. I liked it. The fact that Smaug could not, at the very least, smell out the 13 dwarves and the Hobbit that were in there, that bothered me. The fact that Bilbo did not put on his ring to search for the Arkenstone, knowing full well that there's a gigantic dragon who could very well have been watching him the entire time, was stupid in the extreme. I thought that Smaug's dragon compulsion and being able to make him take it off, that was very good. I thought the design of Smaug was excellent. He is described not as a westernized dragon, but as a fire drake, a worm of the north, and they made him almost Wyvern-like. At first I was angry, but then when I sat back and I went over my dragon lore for a little bit, I said, no, Smaug, no, they made Smaug's design all right. It could have been better. I was expecting a Western dragon, but this design was good. Although I honestly thought Smaug would be bigger. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the perspective. Maybe it's because I was sitting up at the top of the theater. But I felt like Smaug was a little too small. That all the forced perspectives that they gave us made Smaug seem tiny, or not tiny, but smaller in comparison to everything around him. Again, like I said, I have to see this movie again. I think a lot of what happened in it was a little too subtle for me. And it's only if I watch it a second time I'm going to pick up on the things that I needed to in order to enjoy this movie more. Overall, out of 4 stars, because we do a 4-star rating here in Canada, I would give this 2.5. If you ask me what it was out of 10, 7. Would I see this movie again? Well, the answer is yes, because I'm going with TP to see it again. I will definitely see this again. We will review it again with each other. She'll be here. She'll be able to talk the movie up. And that's really all I have to say. I hope you enjoyed this review. I'm sorry if it was not everything you'd hoped for, but I liked parts of this movie. I really liked the character development in this movie. I didn't like what they did with all the unnecessary plots in the movie. I don't like the fact that I feel like I watched 2 movies in one when really I should have been watching one concise consecutive narrative. I love the Dragon Smaug. I don't like how they did the setup. I don't like how they missed out on how they tried to do 2 climaxes and then basically missed out on the one. I'm okay with the fact that they changed around the story a bit. I mean, this is an adaptation for the screen. It's a visual medium as opposed to the books, which are an intellectual medium. So, and I'm not saying that movies aren't intellectual. I'm just saying that as a medium, a book, you have to picture everything that happens in your head. And if you don't have an imagination, that's absolutely impossible. So please take that with a grain of salt. I love this movie. I shouldn't say I like this movie. I like this movie enough. I like this movie enough to be hard on it. I like this movie enough to go and see it again. My recommendation is go and see it if you really feel you need to see it. But recommending it to somebody else, I don't know. I'd have a hard time doing that because I feel like I wasted my money the first time, and I'm probably going to waste my money the second time. Like I said, you weren't going to like this review. So please dislike, subscribe, do all the social stuff. I will see you with the next Hobbit review. Let's see. It should be in 10 days. So I will see you for the next Hobbit review in 10 days. Hopefully I have something better to say about it. I hope that the 3D makes the CGI better, because I want to love this movie. I so want to love this movie. I probably will love this movie. It'll just take some time for me to acquire the taste. But I've been your technical critic. It's been my pleasure to review this movie for you. I will see you next time.